for you and a finger for you. No, that was Jackie Mason in my youth on the Ed Sullivan Show. He was banned for years. But I've got lots of fingers here. I'm Mr. Fingers. I'm here to finger these guitars for you today. I might even sing, but maybe I'll reserve that pleasure to the next go-round on Thursday. It being Tuesday, it feels like a Monday because of Labor Day, all those days. But we spend most of the weekend watching Turner Classic Movies and their wonderful lineup of classic music documentaries, including Woodstock, the director's cut, which was on last night. A little sidebar about that, but my band Gods and Monsters played up at the Bearsville Playhouse in Woodstock maybe 5-6 years ago, when Jerry Harrison was in the lineup, Ernie Brooks, who's been there for years, Billy Ficca. So we had members of Talking Heads, Modern Lovers, and Television, Jason Candler on saxophone from the Hungry March Band, and myself. And Mr. Woodstock himself, Mike Lang, was in attendance and came up to me after the show and said how much he loved it. And then I ran into him in the little grocery in Woodstock the next morning. I went out to get, supplies for a little breakfast. And he was there. Again, I ran into him and he was doubly enthusiastic. And he said, I'm going to talk to people in Europe and, I love this band, blah. Anyway, I really appreciated Mike Lang saying this. And I think he's a great guy. And I think the funny thing about the Woodstock film is that, well, he and Barry Kornfeld and the other backers are like, making it a free festival and talking about losing their shirts. They knew they had this stellar little film that was being made in their back pocket, which went on, of course, to gross an inordinate amount of money and win awards. And anyway, so that was on last night. There was just a great lineup. And lucky for me, my friend Mitch Blank has all of these films in his archive. Mitch is the only sane Dylanologist out there, and he works for the Bob Dylan Foundation. But if you're friends with Mitch and you say, okay, do you have such and such, anything music related, he's bound to have it. And like the Buddha, he will selflessly do favors for you, including duplication of stuff. I occasionally have to buy a turkey sandwich with mayo and Thousand Island dressing, but I digress. So now, today is not a thematic day. I've been doing a lot of them, and today I'm going to just trawl through a little bit of my greatest hits, so to speak. And I got a request from my friend Lely Van Rasbrove from the UK, who's been a wonderful, steady supporter and watcher of these things and spreader of words. And Lely suggested in Messenger today that I play the theme from Autobahn, not the theme from Autobahn, Autobahn. What am I talking about? I don't think it ever made it into a film soundtrack, but it might. And this is by the great Kraftwerk, who I did manage to catch a couple of times back in the day at the Ritz. And I love them, although I thought it was the most uncomfortable standing room only situation in that club, which you may know if you've ever been there. And I thought, these guys are positing this totally utopian vision in their music of this glistening future, and yet we're enjoying it in the most primitive of conditions here in the flea pit, so to speak. All right, so this was on an album called Knitting Factory Tours Europe 1991. It might be on the Essential Gary Lucas, which is soon come on in January, double CD on Knitting Factory Records. And if it's not, I don't know, man. If you send me some dough, a pristine wave file of this track will be winging its way to you shortly. Okay, Autobahn. Let's hear it for German reunification. bit of Autobahn, and there was a book about Kraftwerk that came out a couple of years after I started doing this by a French author, Pascal Boussy. I think it was called Kraftwerk, Man, Myth, Machine. And I was delighted to find that I was referenced in this guy's book in the back for the very curious rendition of Autobahn that I did. And many years later, Pascal Boussy became the head of A&R at Harmonia Mundi, which was a very fine world music and classical music and jazz label based in France and a distributor. They had offices in San Francisco. They had a label called World Village. Anyway, so it's funny how in the music business, the cast of characters from writers and critics, to heads of labels sometimes can switch places, and anyway, it pays to be nice. Now, recently I posted some of my early juvenilia in a series of reviews that I wrote going back to the 60s, my high school days, through the 70s. In the 70s, it was for Zoo World magazine. They were a rock tabloid out of Florida. I wonder what was financing that. I got to ask Arthur Levy. And they were trying to take on Rolling Stone. Didn't make it, but they had a good run for a few years. And I was a regular contributor there with reviews and a couple of features, one on Captain Beefheart I'm particularly proud of. And before that, in high school, I wrote for several underground newspapers in Syracuse. One particularly was titled Cogito, and Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Maybe over the heads of most of the students in that school, but it was peddled in the halls. I was hauled in, actually, out of the halls, into the vice principal's office for distributing this obviously communist smut rag, Cogito, but it was fairly innocuous. Though, again, I'm proud of some of the reviews, so some of them are online now on my website. You can read them, and I post them on Facebook from time to time. And I hope to give you a good laugh. One of them in particular is infamous, and this is a review I wrote for King Crimson's Lark's Tongue and Aspic album, which, to my surprise, I won't say my horror, I don't really care, but it's been reprinted courtesy of Robert Fripp on at least 2 or 3 King Crimson box sets as like maybe the only negative review they ever got. And actually I was trying to be positive in it because I gave them big props at the top for their first 3 albums, which I thought were underrated. But by the time I heard this record, I don't know, I was really in no mood for it that day. Perhaps I ate something that gave me dyspepsia, I don't know. Maybe I had a fugue. But in any case, the lesson learned here is really be careful what you say and do, because it all come back on you. That sounds like a Bob Dylan lyric. Yeah, it's from To Kingdom Come, actually Robbie Robertson. That's his lyric, but Dylan could have written that. It's a karmic thing, and I'll tell you the repercussions, besides being perhaps embarrassed amongst the King Crimson community for years and excoriated at their private meetings, perhaps, I don't know. I, years later, was playing the Berlin Jazz Festival at the Loft, which was a preeminent club in Berlin, and I had such a good time. It was during a festival called Berlin Independence Days. This has to be 1990. So there I met also some friends. One, Charles Shar Murray, is an old friend who I visited at the NME offices, traveling from playing the lead guitar in Leonard Bernstein's Mass, which I did hold down the lead guitar chair, and Lenny gave me my first major compliment. He said, "Man, you were really wailing," which I liked to hear. That kind of made my year. Anyway, I went from there directly to England to check it out, to London, because I was an arch Anglophile and I wanted to catch up whatever, remnants of the scene that I was so idealized in my mind, existed, to see what was going on, and I had some nice times there. But I met Charles Shar Murray and Nick Kent, his buddy, up at the NME. And then years later, Charles turned up at Berlin Independence Days along with another now old friend of mine, David Stubbs, and another writer, Stephen Wells, who's no longer with us, who used to write under the pen name Seething Wells and sometimes Susan Williams. He assumed well, he had a fluid gender persona, let's say, to use the parlance of now. So these guys, well, we had a fine old time, and then I was getting ready to go on to play solo and do things like Audubon and my repertoire, and there was a knock on my dressing room door, and I opened it, and this guy, I had no idea who it was, walked in, and he said to me, "Hi, Gary. I'm David Cross's manager." Now, if you know your Lark's Tongue album, it featured a violinist named David Cross, who, honestly, when I heard it, I wasn't much impressed. I mean, I knew Jerry Goodman, of course, and Jean-Luc Ponty. I thought this guy was not quite up to snuff, and I'd also seen an English band opening for another band at the Palladium, formerly the Academy of Music on 14th Street. In that period, a band called String Driven Thing on Charisma. Again, I didn't think much of their violinists, so I got very snarky at the end of the review, and I said, to paraphrase Pauline Kael, who, if you know your film criticism, is one of the snarkiest critics of them all, although she gets a pass often for being a woman, I think, in that regard, but she's, quite opinionated and lets you know it. If a contest was held between the violinist of String Driven Thing and David Cross of King Crimson as to who was the worst violinist, the violinist from String Driven Thing would lose the contest, which was a very backhanded insult, not really a compliment. Anyway, I was a youngster and I was trying to make my name, so anyway, I opened the door and this guy came forward and he said, "I'm David Cross's manager." So I froze a little bit, holy shit, is the guy going to punch me out? Is this going to be the retribution, down the line, some years down the line for that review, which is rumbled in the gravy stains dining rooms in the Eastern Seaboard for many a year? He just looked at me and he said, "Have a great show," which was nice, and I said, "All right, well, nice to meet you," and he left. That's it. In a way, it was like the guy coming to say, "We got our eye on you, don't get out of line here and get nasty on David Cross during your show," or maybe something like that. But it was a gesture that I guess my review had struck a nerve. And so, well, what can I say? I still am a big fan of those early King Crimson records. I've seen him a bunch of times. Fripp himself, Boys and Girls, told a very good friend of mine who was trying to manage me, Gary Lucas is a good guitarist. So, yeah, there's no problem there. Live and let live. Now I'm trying to be as constructive a critic as possible when I get called on to do it. And I guess that would be the lesson here. Okay, well. Y'all want me to play now, don't you? Or actually, I enjoy sometimes just telling you these stories because they're therapy for me, I mean, like in lieu of visiting a shrink, I don't really have the luxury to indulge such nonsense anymore. When it was free, when I was at Yale, okay, the sky was the limit there at the Department of University Health. Philip Smith, thank you. Thank you for your contribution. This is my pandemic, what would you say, the Hall of Fame. These are the righteous among the elect. Jonathan Luftig, he's got a wedding anniversary coming up Saturday. I'm going to devote my show to Jonathan. Whatever he wants to hear, that I'm still able to play. God willing, I will. Mark Green, my guitar student and steadfast friend out in the Midwest. Great Captain Beefheart session. Mark is referring to a three-parter devoted to Don Van Vliet and the band, the Magic Band, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the release of Doc at the Radar Station, which is an album that marked, for me, my emergence on the world stage as a guitarist. And a lot of people took note of my contribution on there, including Lester Bangs, right here on our stage, right here in this living room, listening to the album, asked me, "What part are you playing, the top or the bottom?" And I said, "It's all me, Lester, in real time." And so that was pretty good. That was up there with Lenny. I've had some great compliments from a lot of big shots over the years. All right, Todd Gray. Todd, thank you so much also. And he said he last saw me play with Feifei Yan, my lovely mainland Chinese singer and erhu virtuoso. I wish I could import Feifei here, or a waveform of Feifei to stand before you to sing during this pandemic, but it's not to be. But maybe somebody will figure out a new stratagem. I don't know. I don't think the drive-in movie idea is also hot, particularly for a guy like me, because I stopped driving. I recused myself from driving. I used to think I was a really good driver until I had a near fatality with Caroline in the car on the way to a gig in Vermont, spinning out 3 times on black ice. I mean, 360-degree spin around. Managed to survive that, but that was the end of my driving, because I said, I don't think I'm going to put myself through this anymore. Okay, so where were we? I think I'll play a little bit of acoustic guitar now. And gee, I hope the sound is vastly improved. I keep peering over here at my Blue Yeti QAnon-approved microphone here. It's like microphone of champion bloggers and right-wing rabble-rousers, of which I'm not, boys and girls. That's a joke. Hardly. The opposite might be applied here. So, always at the end of these things, I look at the comments and I interact with you guys, because the camera's over there. I can't really do it from here. And the people are always saying this and that, like, you need to adjust the level or it's overloading, and the guitar is great, but the voice isn't loud enough. I don't know. Sue me. a little bit of two bits of film music I composed. I've done a lot of scores, about a dozen so far, for various silent and a few sound films. The first I incorporated into a score for the film The Unholy Three. There are two versions. There's a silent version directed by Tad Browning, and then there's a sound version also directed by Browning. The silent one is the one to see if you get a chance, and it was first performed on a commission for the Film Society of Lincoln Center. Thank you to my friend Richard Pena, who was the director of the Film Society for many a year. And he commissioned the score, which I debuted in 2009. And 2 years ago, I did it at the Cinémathèque Française in Paris, and had a ball playing there. It was very well received, and thank you to those folks, Annick Girard and Nicolas Lettieri Duniquin, and Nicole Brenege, who's an expert on all sorts of cinema, especially Abel Ferrara's cinema. She gave a talk about Todd Browning after I played. It was a lovely event. And then most recently I did it at the Metrograph Cinema here in New York. And thanks to my friend Bob Rubin and Jacob Perlin, who hooked up an ongoing series of my live scores, which hopefully will resume as soon as they reopen cinemas here. I'm going to lobby to get back there. But again, you know, the main question for all us musicians is, how are we going to be able to do this? Now, I heard from Richard today, he knows I'm a big Van Morrison fan, and he mentioned Van triggering an association with me. Van Morrison recently railed against social distancing and called it pseudoscience. And I'd rather be dead than red. No, I'd rather be safe than sorry, folks, to tell you the truth. I mean, much as I want to play for y'all, it's like I would like it to be more controlled situation where I didn't really worry whether I was going to be communicated upon or vice versa with this virus. I have the example of my late mother, who passed away, you know, may she rest in peace, a couple of months ago from the virus, and she was in a nursing home in California. And the statistics have just come out, courtesy of the New York Times. There are over 66,000 deaths in this country alone. It's about 1/3 of the total deaths so far that we know of that occurred in nursing homes. And my sister Lori, who looked after her on a daily basis, thinks she probably would have lived to 100, because she really didn't have anything wrong with her physically. And she was very strong and compos mentis, as they say. But once the virus infected her, she had a rapid decline in about a week to 10 days, and then was gone. Anyway, all right, I'd like to end on a positive note, and that is, I'm open for suggestions, guys, for Thursday. Jonathan Luftig is going to tell me what he wants to hear Saturday. Why don't you tell me what you'd really like to hear, and accompany these requests with some sort of bribe, you know, to PayPal. Look at it as a tip or a bribe. And I would most appreciate it. I really would. And so would Caroline. So until that time, I want to bid you fond farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye. Do a little Sound of Music for you next time. Okay, everybody be safe. Don't be sorry. Love you guys.